The Chargers started their voluntary OTAs on Tuesday, and it was great to see the guys back on the field. But the biggest news was who wasn't out there, and that was All-Pro left tackle Rashawn Slater.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 9 seasons, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, the Chargers were back on the football field for the first time in a very long time, and unfortunately, one of the stars was not there, and of course, that is All-Pro left tackle Rashawn Slater, although not really too worried about that just yet. And then, of course, the big story last year was a pair of 5th-round corners really showing up and showing out with Tarheeb Still and Hart, and we're expecting some big things out of those guys again this season.
Yeah, we are, and we also will talk about some of the biggest plays that happened today at OTAs as well, because we'll take anything at this point, and it was also great to see second-round pick Tre Harris out there getting some connection with Justin Herbert as well. But the biggest story, until it's not a story, is going to be Rashawn Slater, and the further we get into the offseason, the more worrisome it's going to get. And I will say, to start things, it's not time to panic. The alarm bell shouldn't be going off at this point. But today was significant, and it's significant because according to Daniel Popper, this was the first time in his career that he has missed an opening OTA session. So this is different than maybe him working with Duke Manyweather or doing his own kind of offseason program. At the same time, this is a voluntary OTA. This isn't a huge declaration of I'm not playing and I'm hugely upset about the contract, but at the same time, he's been one of the best left tackles in the league, and he deserves to get paid that way, and I still think he will. But this isn't that big of a deal. But it could start to be a bigger deal, especially specifically for him, because according to the collective bargaining agreement, according to Daniel Popper, teams can fine players up to $15,000 for the first day of missed minicamp, $31,000 for the second, $46,000 for the third. So once he starts missing money and they start charging him for these things, maybe then it gets a little bit more concerning than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a little bit of a deviation from his, prototypical norm as far as, him actually showing up. He normally does show up for these type of situations. But, hey, I mean, let's be honest here. This is all about the money. I mean, I guarantee you this is a message from his representation saying, hey, you have absolutely nothing to gain and a lot to lose for you to go on the football field right now without having the security, the long-term security of that, probably multi-$100 million contract that he's going to sign. And he's probably going to be, one of the top paid, and rightfully so, left tackles in the National Football League. I do still firmly believe that that is a matter of when and not if, but hey, this is going to be how it's supposed to be for Rashawn Slater and the Chargers until that contract gets consummated.
Absolutely. And to your point, this is the riskiest time for Rashawn Slater, at least from an injury standpoint financially, because he has already shown that he's one of the best tackles in the NFL. He's an all-pro tackle.
Period.
That is what it is. I mean, and he's shown it whenever he's been out on the field. He's always brought a level of excellence that will make him potentially the highest paid tackle, and if not the highest, top 3, right? You were talking about, a couple million here, a couple million there, but He's going to be paid a lucrative offer. And I
handsomely.
think that, yeah, I mean, obviously we're not going to ever comment on like the speculation. I know we see the comments from, on YouTube of what Chargers fans think is the reason for him not being out there, but I do think it is deeper than that. And I do think this is a step in saying, okay, well, I don't have that contract. I'm not secure long-term financially. And if I go out there and, God forbid, knock on wood, get a serious injury, that valuation goes down. That just is what it is. Like, he's still going to get paid a ton, but either way, it doesn't make sense financially for him to be out there. Now, we've talked about it many times before. This is not when the Chargers usually do these kinds of deals. These deals get done right before training camp, right at the beginning of training camp, like they did with Joey Bosa, like they did with Derwin James. I know it's a new regime, but the cap guy is still the cap guy. And these are
Ed
when
McGuire,
those deals
same dude.
usually get done. So still 100% believe a deal gets done. I think there's 0% chance that this causes him to miss games. So one thing we did get to see from Eric Smith was some of the offensive line combinations. I thought it was interesting that Branson Taylor got left guard reps with the first, second, and third team. So at a new position, they're throwing him in and saying, get as many reps as you possibly can. Zion Johnson was snapping at practice, but didn't do the 11-on-11 period, which at this point is shorts and t-shirts anyways. But it does, I think, kind of bring up the point, David, because Bradley Bozeman was out there with the first team, for the entirety of that part of practice. If Zion Johnson gets hurt at all, like it feels like it kind of ends the Zion Johnson at center experiment, right? Because it's like, if he is going to really try to make that overwhelming change in one off season, like it's so important that he's out there for every part of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is crucial. Like, this is him playing a whole completely different position he has never played before ever in his entire life. So he needs every single opportunity to learn not only how, to do that position, but to learn the nuances, to understand the communication, and to understand the angles. There's so many different things that go along with switching from guard to center in the National Football League, mind you. We're talking about trying to transition to a different position at the highest level of football. This is not easy. And so if he suffers any kind of setback whatsoever, you can pretty much kiss that position change goodbye.
Which means we probably end up with the same left guard center combination that we saw last season, which
I still think is highly likely.
Prevailing favorite anyways. But that wasn't the only thing we saw, because we did for the first time, because they really just did individuals at the rookie ball parts of the offseason. Those guys going 11-on-11, those guys competing against each other. And it was second round pick Tre Harris that was out there making some plays on day one. 3 different receptions according to Daniel Popper, which I just absolutely love to see. But the biggest play of the day, maybe unsurprisingly, was made with Justin Herbert going deep to Ladd McConkey.
Yep, receiver Ladd McConkey made the splash play of the day by going down the left sideline during a third down play. Herbert launched a go ball on 3rd and 5, and McConkey tipped the ball to himself and made a fantastic one-handed catch, according to Daniel Popper of The Athletic. That is awesome, man. It just goes to show you, Ladd McConkey is not just a slot receiver. He is a true number one, and he can really access every single part of the football field. It was really crazy kind of seeing that unfold last year, because we always knew he had a great skill set. He had a rare ability to snap off his routes and be super precise. We did not know he was going to be a problem at every level of the defense. He absolutely is. Ladd McConkey is a monster. Can't wait to see how he follows up his inaugural season in the NFL.
And it's worth mentioning that the Chargers were not going full speed tempo, but I'll tell you later why at least Tarheeb still thinks that there is still a lot of value to what they're doing right now, even before or even without really being allowed to make big physical plays on a ball when those opportunities present themselves. But I did like from Tre Harris that he's getting some action right now. He's getting at least some chemistry with Justin Herbert. This is how Daniel Popper said it went down. In the first period, he ran a smooth out route to the right side, created separation, and hauled in a completion from Justin Herbert. On the next snap, Harris won on a comeback route to the left side, beating Tarheeb Still, and Taylor Heineke hit Harris for the completion. Also said that he caught a deep ball down the sideline later from Taylor Heineke too. So are these, the end-all be-all of, okay, hey, this dude has arrived and he's showing up? I mean, I remember when Quentin Johnston, coming out of camp, he went on some podcast and said, like, yeah, I'm a starter already. Coming out of periods like this, where it's like, there's just no way you can do that. No, this isn't going to decide that he's going to be a starter now because he's, making plays, making just a couple of plays at voluntary OTAs. But this is how it's important. The more plays you make now with the second team and with Taylor Heineke, the more chances you are going to get later on in training camp and later on in the offseason for first team reps catching passes from Justin Herbert. And it's hard to put in the importance on just how big that connection is going to be, because when you don't have that connection, it can look like Quentin Johnston's rookie season. When you do have that connection, it can look like Ladd McConkey's rookie season. So getting those reps is valuable. Making these plays, even at this moment, is valuable. But it wasn't just the offensive players making the big plays. The defense got on the action too, including Tarheeb Still picking up where he left off, maybe picking off where he left off, creating big plays. We're going to talk about him and the next step he has taken in his game, including the leadership learning from Khalil Mack, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a time to get in on the action that's better than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, and fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And we've had some really good games, not just the last couple close games in the NBA with the Knicks fighting for their lives, the Timberwolves trying to get back into things, but also in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And I'm all in on the Florida Panthers going for back-to-back Stanley Cups, and I'm all in on the Ice Cats finishing the series on the road tonight like they did against the Maple Leafs in round 2. Right now, you can pick the Panthers to win by at least 2 goals in Game 5 and get that at plus 186, and they've blown them out already at home. But if you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, let's get into the other side of the ball, and one guy specifically that was making plays at Chargers practice, because he was talking at his press conference after practice saying basically it started off with a dream come true, a chance to get an interception right off the bat, and he didn't end up getting it, according to Eric Smith and Daniel Popper and everyone that was at practice. But what he did was knock a ball up to Denzel Perryman, who on the first team rep for the Chargers defense in 2025 in the offseason, gets them an interception, which for someone like that we like to call Tarheeb Still, that is exactly where it should start. And they're not able to go full tempo, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But David, picking up right where he left off, making plays even when they're not really allowed to make big plays, and he's still finding a way to stand out.
Hey, baller's ball, man. Baller's ball. That's exactly what Tarheeb Still does whenever he's on the football field. He's making plays, and he just has those instincts. He, really, I think in his rookie year, it kind of reminds me of Derwin James in his rookie year when he was talking about how he was just playing with his athletic ability and really just letting his unbelievable speed and his just natural God-given talent go out there and take over. He didn't really fully understand things in his rookie season. And I think that's kind of a little bit of what happened with Tarheeb Still too, with his 4 interceptions. But also it's just having that knack for being in the right place at the right time and really knowing how to close that distance and make plays on the football field. And that's just what Tarheeb Still does. It's just the type of player he is now. We'll see if he's able to be more of a complete player, obviously. But, man, what he's been able to provide in his rookie season, I think is very encouraging. And hopefully we get to see him take that next step in his sophomore season.
Which, when you have 4 interceptions as a rookie, the next step is putting yourself amongst the best in the NFL. But even in a kind of half-tempo, not a super physical practice, he was saying it was still beneficial. He said it's really good to work on your technique, being able to cover guy and not touching them, no hands on, really stay with them hip to hip, and then really letting the receiver catch the ball and get a good finish, which obviously is important for him. He also was the guy that Ladd McConkey caught the deep ball on, and he said, hey, Daniel Popper, I know, asked him if that was full speed, are you picking that ball off? And he said no comment with a smile on his face. So the biggest play went to Ladd McConkey. The biggest play of the day might have been Tarheeb Still's had they been playing full speeds and how they've been playing in pads. But I thought that was really cool to see. Day one, he's already kind of getting mentioned from the beat reporters as a guy who's standing out of practice. But it was also great hearing Coach Steve Clinkscale, the defensive backs coach, talking about Tarheeb Still's leadership and the maturity that he sees in him now going into year 2. He said basically already a mature guy, but came back as a different player overnight. And part of that, David, seemed to be Khalil Mack taking him under his wing, because Steve Clinkscale couldn't stop raving about the leadership now that he's seeing from Tarheeb Still, only going into his 2nd season.
I mean, not a bad person to rub shoulders with, huh? A future first ballot Hall of Famer with Khalil Mack. And, basically this kind of came about because, Tarheeb Still was in the facility working out Monday through Thursday. And, he was taking his Fridays off, trying to enjoy a long 3-day weekend. And, of course, the workman that Khalil Mack was like, why are you taking Friday off? I mean, why aren't you in the facility? Why aren't you getting another workout in? Why aren't you, doing the Ben Herbert experience and getting that full, body of work Monday through Friday? Why not? And basically, that turned into Khalil Mack and Tarheeb Still working out together, doing the Ben Herbert workouts. And he actually, Tarheeb said, hey, I really am excited and happy that I made that decision, because not only, do I get to work out with Khalil Mack and pick his brain and learn and get better, but I feel better about myself being able to kind of put that full, work week in, and then being able to enjoy my weekends and still being able to feel like I'm getting to separate a little bit from football while also taking it very, very seriously. Because as we know, Khalil Mack is one of the most durable football players in the history of the National Football League. And it's because he takes care of his body and he does the work in the offseason so that he can enjoy the fruits of his labors during the season. And I think that's part of the lesson that he's trying to teach Tarheeb Still.
And it was funny too, because Daniel Palmer from The Athletic was like, "Oh, did he have to invite you? Is that the special Friday workout that you have to get Khalil Mack's permission to go to or whatever?" But it is pretty funny, and I just think it says a lot about Tarheeb Still, who could have gotten just the biggest head in the world. I mean, he showed up to the biggest stage of his sport and just thrived right away. I mean, 4 interceptions. Some good corners don't get that in most of the seasons of their entire careers. So to see him do that, but also still being in the offseason, putting in that work, and also Khalil Mack, I don't think just pays, not that he discriminates against worse players, but if you're seeing Khalil Mack at this year, year 17 or something, right?
It's wild.
Taking him under his wing, a young cornerback, I think it shows you kind of he sees where it could go and he wants to kind of keep him on that right path. But to also hear Steve Clinkscale say, I'm seeing him lead. He's in the front. He tries to win every sprint. He's in the front of every drill. He's talking to the young guys, and he was just there at this time last year. And he said his effort has been relentless. And I think that for a guy like Tarheeb Still, who not was boom or bust, but also had his fair share of down plays too, it's nice to see that he isn't just looking at the 4 interceptions. He's looking at all the ways that he can get better too. And I really thought that Steve Clinkscale was very candid on where he does have to get better. And David, it's hard not to love this specific quote from Steve Clinkscale. He said, has to be better tackling. When talking about him having to be better tackling, he says, tackle. I want to see that improve for sure. I'm a tackling guy. We're going to tackle every day, leveraging the blocks better. He gave up 2 big plays last year because he went inside the blocks instead of outside, doing a better job leveraging the block and crack replace. And those were some of the things he said he needs to get better at. And I think for Tarheeb Still, it's one of the things I'm talking about many times this offseason. You could be a Marcus Peters who's going to have your fair share of, missed tackles and big plays that you gave up, but also have 5 or 6 interceptions a season. If he can work out those parts of his game, David, specifically the tackling and just the reads on his blocks and getting contained and being on the outside, that's what turns you into just from a ball hawk and a good player that's going to have picks to a really great player, which he has the potential to be.
He absolutely does. And I think, this is a really kind of cool insight to kind of these evaluations that go on after the season, kind of those exit interviews. And, that's what Jim Harbaugh said. Hey, they go with every single player and they kind of give them the list of things that they need to improve upon. And Steve Clinkscale basically just told everybody what was on the list for Tarheeb Still. So that was very, very cool to kind of see him kind of spell it out. And I mean, this is things that we've talked about too, with Tarheeb Still, with his play style. I mean, the interceptions are great. I mean, they're fantastic. They're game changing. They are big, big plays, no matter when you can get them. But you know what else is big plays? When you miss the tackle and you let somebody go 30, 40, 50 yards and score a touchdown. So if you want to, take that next step in year 2 and not have that sophomore slump and instead have that sophomore leap, these are some of the things that he needs to work on. And if he does, man, he has the ball skills and the instincts to really be one of the top corners in the league.
Yeah, and I mean, to see it so plainly and for, just the candidness of saying the things that we thought, where it's man, those film sessions the next day after you have a play like you had against the Broncos where Marvin Mims is, taking a handoff or a sweep to the outside. He goes inside the receiver trying to make a big play. Marvin Mims gets outside and takes it to the house, right?
Yeah.
Or the Mike Evans play where he has him, a chance to tackle him on the outside, doesn't get him, and that turns into a 30 or 40-yard gain. Those plays do stick out as much as the interceptions do in a lot of ways for this coaching staff specifically. So it feels like the vibe that Steve Clinkscale was kind of giving just hearing Tarheeb Still himself at the press conference where, man, this dude seems very mature. He seems to really understand the things he has to get better at, and he's not going to be complacent. I mean, he's out there working with a future Hall of Famer in Khalil Mack, who he said, showing him how to be intentional every day, taking advantage, small incremental gains to get where I want to be. That seems like a player who has his head on straight and is ready to potentially make a big impact again in 2025. But it wasn't all good news that we heard at the press conferences, because we did actually find out Cam Hart revealed that he had another surgery on his shoulder, making it the 4th shoulder surgery that he's had since 2019. So we're going to get into that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, we still have more to get to from the first day of Chargers voluntary OTAs. Great seeing the guys back out there, and great to be back with you guys with some stuff actually happening. We love that. Any kind of content, we're going to be here for. I know a lot of shows are taking time off this time of year. You can be here with us whenever big Chargers things are happening. And we have another practice today that we'll be back with you guys to talk about tomorrow. So excited about that, but thank you for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show with Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, as they give you the wide look at the entire NFL and make you the most informed fan this offseason on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. But David, we knew that Cam Hart had to leave the last game in the playoffs against the Texans due to an injury, and we know that the defense was hurt because of it. I mean, they dropped off when he left that game, especially not having a big guy like him to have on someone like a Nico Collins was a huge miss for them. But the thing about it being the last game of the season, you stop getting injury reports. You stop getting practice reports. You don't really know what's going on. So it was pretty enlightening when Cam Hart got up at the press conference and said that he was recovering and not out on the field at voluntary OTAs because he had a 4th shoulder surgery since 2019. Said it was a torn labrum that he had this time, something he's actually gone through already before. David, this was always kind of the thing with Cam Hart, right? The reason he was a 5th round pick was not because of his level of play. You had the play of a 2nd rounder, maybe a 3rd rounder, but it's about the shoulder injury specifically. So I know we were concerned and are still concerned a little bit by the 2 concussions that he suffered as a rookie, but to also add another shoulder injury on top of that definitely isn't great news.
It's not. It's really kind of a little bit heartbreaking for Cam Hart to continuously have to go through that vicious cycle of rehab over and over and over again. And as somebody who has torn their labrum personally and the rotator cuff, I can tell you it took me quite a long time to be able to get most of my strength back in my right shoulder. After I fell off a ladder from 20 plus feet up, it was not a very good experience, and it took a very, very long time. Now, obviously, I don't have anywhere close to the same level of resources that the Chargers are going to be able to provide to Cam Hart.
But you're also not being asked to cover some of the fastest people in the world either. So
no,
it's a different expectation from him too. Yeah,
exactly.
It's a big deal.
But it is not a very, very good sign for him to have to continuously have to rehab the same type of issues, because, I mean, those type of repeat injuries are what is going to, if you're not able to get them under control, it's going to lead to you not being in the NFL anymore.
Yeah, and that's just what it is. Or at least, we saw that with Jason Verrett, who still stayed in the league a while, but just, one season-ending injury after the other. He played most of the season last year, did Cam Hart, right? So it didn't end up costing him at least any missed total games, because they ended up losing in the playoffs anyways, but it would have taken him out of that playoff run, and if the Chargers had kept going, they would have needed him, right? Yeah. And that is, I think, the unfortunate part of having, 2 rookie cornerbacks in Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart, who were just so impressive. It does put a damper on that a little bit, because as much as you want to say, okay, well, for the next 3 seasons, we're going to have one of the best young cornerback duos in the NFL. It takes away from some of that excitement when you're always potentially worried about a 5th shoulder surgery. But I think the perseverance that it shows for someone like Cam Hart to continually want to rehab and continually get back on the field, where I'm sure anytime he could have shut it down and been like, man, this is just too tough. I'm so tired of having to do these things. Yeah. And he didn't. But I think the good news is he said that he should be able to be a full go for training camp, and he should be back in mini camp in only a couple of weeks. So it shouldn't stunt his development from that aspect, because he's still been able to do all the mental side of things. But he said his biggest goal going into the season is just going to be 17 healthy games, David, and his defensive backs coach Steve Clinkscale echoed that.
Yep, he sure did. He said his thing is really just the durability, wanting him to continue to just grow and mature in that situation. And Cam Hart himself said that, that's something I've been tormenting over, something I've been mad about myself. I showed a small percentage of who Cam can be in the NFL last year. So, that's something that is very much on his mind, on the coach's mind. And Steve Clinkscale also said something that I say all the time, which is availability is one of the best abilities. And it is obviously a fact, because it doesn't matter how good you look in shorts and a t-shirt. If you can't get on the football field, you can't help your football team. And so Cam Hart needs to do the prehab, needs to do the rehab, needs to make sure he can do every single thing within his control to make sure that he can be on the football field to take that next step in his career, because we saw some great things out of him. The physicality, the length, the playing like a big corner. He did all of those things at such a great level last year, and you just don't want to see an injury stunt his growth in year two.
Absolutely not. I did think that the kind of tone of Steve Clinkscale was a little surprising, just as far as like him being able to continue to mature and grow in that situation, when it's like, man, the dude, tore his labrum. Like, and obviously it felt like what he was saying is, this is what he said: understanding they've got to really invest in things outside of the building, pour everything in here, and then also get the sleep, get the food, get the rest that you need.
Yeah.
To me, reading between the lines, it made it almost seem like he wasn't doing all the things off the field that he could be doing to not get hurt. That's just the vibe I got from it. I don't think
I heard that tone too.
It's just like, he also said he knows not everything is avoidable too, but it was just kind of a weird tenor that he had there, where it's just like, is it his fault that, he tore his labrum, that he had his fourth shoulder injury? I just thought that was kind of interesting. But
it was.
Another interesting thing that Cam Hart said was just that he doesn't let even his long list of, injuries affect him once he gets on the field. This from Daniel Popper. He said, once you cross that line of trying to change your game to compensate for the injury, then you're just thinking too much. And football is never about thinking. It's always about reacting. Once I stepped on the field, I'm not thinking about no injury or what I may have been nicked up last game. I'm out there to play full speed, and give my teammate and my teammates everything I got. And I think that is an important part of it, is it's hard not to overcompensate or try to play differently to stop something that keeps happening. When in reality, you're going to just kind of need a little bit of luck. And when you said prehab, that's an interesting part of it too, because I don't think a lot of people know what that is. But I think that what they're talking about there is what Ben Herbert is doing off of the field to try to strengthen neck muscles, to help with concussions, and to be able to work on maybe his shoulder in this situation to try to make it harder to break, which was the big thing last year. So I think when you're talking about prehab, I think that's where that comes from. But it was also interesting just hearing Coach Clinkscale talk about the competition in that cornerback room as the offseason starts to heat up, and saying nobody has a spot. We want to see who is going to earn it. David, when you hear that in that room, I think it gets you excited about the competition and the depth that they now have there that is going to get tested during this offseason, about who is going to actually get those snaps on the field.
Well, it's also exciting for me because we know that the Chargers have had coaches in the past that have played favorites and had people that are already penciled in into starting roles where maybe they didn't really deserve it. And so I think saying openly to everybody, hey, this is going to be an open competition. Nobody is penciled into any spots, obviously, unless your name is Derwin James. Then, you're going to roam wherever you are. But, that's earned, right? He's earned that through a long career in the NFL. But for all of these young cornerbacks, I think it's time for them to step up and earn the role that they want. And I think that's what the coach is saying here.
And not just your role, your spot, your roster spot.
Claim your spot, yeah.
And he said, I want the 4 best, 5 best, 6 best out there on the field as much as possible. So you got to go prove to him that you're a top 6 corner on this team, because I don't see him keeping more than that, which means there's going to be a tough decision at the end of the roster. But I do think that having the depth they have there now, adding Benjamin Saint-Juste, adding Donte Jackson, 2 guys obviously that they went and sought out specifically for Jesse Minter to go along with a Dean Leonard who's been developing, a Jasir Taylor who has a ton of starting experience at the very least. Who of those guys is going to stand out? And he also talked about, versatility being important. He also said that they added more size and speed outside, which is something they felt like they needed, obviously. When they let Christian Fulton go and brought in the guys that they did. So I think they think it's going to be a better room, and it'll be interesting how the bottom of that room plays out. And maybe we were a little too quick, David, to write off Jasir Taylor, because Steve Clinkscale, that was very high on what Jasir Taylor has been able to do as far as improving, and also said that last year the injury that Jasir Taylor had and tried to play through might have been a big reason. Because, I mean, let's be honest, he was borderline unplayable last year, and they couldn't play him at the end of the season. But he said, hey, he's really tough. He also kind of unprompted just talked about how good he has looked this offseason. So as a guy who plays a ton of special teams, he's going to have a chance. But there's probably 6 spots, and it does feel like Triquez Bridges, Jasir Taylor, Dean Leonard could be all fighting for that 6th spot at the end of the roster, and we're very excited to see it, and very excited to see what today's voluntary OTAs bring, and be back with you guys tomorrow to talk about it. And to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every single day and getting your potential Fan Mail Friday questions in this week at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. If you guys want to call in and get a voicemail in, that's always the best way to get on the show. You can do that at 323-524-7924 and get your 30-second Chargers questions in. But David, in a small way, football is very, very back, and we will be back with you guys tomorrow to talk about the latest coming out of Chargers voluntary OTAs. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.